time for pack 1 of this Theros draft. Not the most amazing pack I've ever seen. Most of the commons are really not exciting. Baleful Eidolon might actually be the best of them, but yeah, that's not saying a lot. There is Gift of Immortality, which is a fun card, but not something that I would pick highly. I like to play it sometimes, because it can be quite nice with heroic and against controller strategies, but I believe that we should take one of the uncommons here. Let's see, I've Ordeal of Thassa. I really like it, but it is quite narrow. You need to be aggressive for that to work. Then there's Mogus's Marauder and Favorite Hoplite. I'm gonna take Favorite Hoplite here because I think that for a heroic strategy you need a critical mass of heroic cards. It's much easier to find targeting effects. And on the other hand, Mogus's Marauder is not really the type of card which I like to have in my black decks, because I like my black decks to be more controlling. So Mogus's Marauder is usually only a 22nd to 23rd card in these kind of decks. Favorite Hoplite to start with, and we are getting past Mtgo the Ageless. I've never gotten this second pick actually. It's a mythic rare that's not only 4/4 flying but also has some very sweet text on it. I think I'm just gonna take it. Even if I hadn't taken Favorite Hoplite first, this is a great follow-up. I like it better than Griptide, although Griptide is a very nice common in this particular format. Dragon Mantle, Sedge Scorpion, of course, not really contenders, and quite a weak pack of uncommons. Destructive Reveille has its uses, but it's not a high pick at all in my experience. Yeah, that's a nice gift, I would say. Looks like the rares keep coming. Temple of Deceit, not really what we want, but something to keep in mind, as this pack doesn't really offer too much in the way of blue and white. Traveling Philosopher and Silent Artisan aren't third pick caliber. That's pretty easy to see. Lash of the Whip, Disciple of Phoenix, and Erebos's Emissary in black are three pretty powerful cards. The problem with Mtgo is that we are looking to be blue-white if possible, but I'm not going to take Traveling Philosopher out of this pack just to force this color combination. Nylea's Disciple and Time to Feed are two good green cards in this pack, but I think the black cards are slightly stronger. I'm going to highlight Erebos's Emissary here because it works better with the white cards. It's in the control-ish black decks, I like Disciple of Phoenix the best, also because it adds 2 to your devotion count. But Erebos's Emissary is a card that's going to be good in a wider range of decks, also in some kind of heroic deck, which this might move into. Now, here we have God's Willing, which doesn't have to be a signal for white. There is a couple of cards that you definitely take over God's Willing, or at least I do. The 2 Bestow Creatures and Wingsteed Rider, for example, but it's still a very good card to have. It also works really nicely with the creatures we already have. Just imagine dropping Mtgo on 7 and having the protection up, for example. Best cards in this pack are Leaf Crown Dryad, and yeah, that's the best card. And then it's probably between Nesting Cursor, Titan Strength, Stone Shock Giant. I like the Giant quite a bit, but it's really a hit or miss card. I'm gonna be, well, I could stay really open with taking Leaf Crown right here, but I'm gonna take God's Willing. I have 2 white cards, and if there is a chance that white is open, I definitely want to take it. And well, it just, I feel it has the best upside if I take the God's Willing here. This pack has Sealock Monster, a card which I thought was really strong in the beginning, but in the end it's quite expensive, and if your opponent is not playing islands, then it's also very slow. And really not much of a threat, because then at some point it will just get chump blocked or getting death touched to death or whatever. Cavalry Pegasus and Suggestion Battle Priest are only alright, although the Pegasus can be quite insane with if you have a Fabled Hero or something along these lines. Favorite Hoplite is also so a human, but I kind of like Evangel of Heliod here, continuing down the white path and not committing to the second color yet. Ordeal of Erebos isn't really what I'm looking to draft at this stage. All right, here we go. White isn't a consideration. Laguna Bandello is only okay. But there is Tormented Hero, Sip of Hemlock, and a couple of blue cards, all of which don't really excite me. Fate Foretold is alright, but there's better ways to target. Simit Hopes is very situational, and Thassa's Bounty is just very slow. We also have 2 6-drops already, potentially. Tormented Hero is... well, I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's a good curve for curve purposes, but it's really just a 2-1 for 1. The fact that it has heroic is really irrelevant. I'm gonna take Sip of Hemlock here. It's the best cards in the 3 colors I've drafted so far. Ill-Tempered Cyclops might be a tad better, but yeah, not reason enough to get rid of the Erebos' Emissary that I've picked earlier. All right, we still don't really know where we're heading with this, but I'm not too concerned. I'm hopeful that this will be all right, but I'm not gonna start taking red cards this late. A Dragon Mantle and Destructive Revelry, in this case. March of the Returned and As for the Wanderer, on the other hand, aren't really what I'm looking for. I could take Unknown Shores here. With the Medomai, the Ageless, it would give me a way to cast Medomai, even if it's only on turn 7. It's not a great pick, but I'm just gonna take some fixing here. Alright, these packs haven't really been too exciting. Hopefully the next pack is a bit more interesting. Decorated Griffin is an okay card, playable card, and Viper's Kiss is something that sometimes you're really happy to have early, and sometimes you just draw it and it does absolutely nothing. I'm gonna take the Griffin here. I've 0 5-drops currently, and if anything, I want to be white in this draft, so let's take that. Silent Artisan is potential playable. It is 3/5 for 5 after all. Aquarius Forum can be really good in white heroic decks, though. The question is, how likely is it that we are going to end up in blue-white heroic still? It's not too likely, but it's still so much better than Silent Artisan. If the blue-white deck comes together, that I would rather have the Aquarius Forum. Alright, it looks like red is wide open, with another Dragon Mantle passing by, Destructive Revelry, even Flamespeaker Adept, not too shabby. I don't like March of the Return, so I'm going to take out one of the cards that I don't want to see here, and that's probably Destructive Revelry. The blowout of just losing a bestow creature to an instant speed removal spell that also deals damage to you is not something I'm looking forward to. Prowler's Helm is not really my kind of card. Don't really like the effect, so I'm just gonna keep taking white cards here. Even Yoke Dogs, yeah, even Yoke Dogs. Mnemonic Wall or Loathsome Catoblepus. Yeah, the Catoblepus is playable, but it would never make this deck. It's unlikely that the wall is going to, but let's just take it. Alright, this is very interesting. Apparent Overlord is very, very good in a heavy black deck, but not too great in a 3-color deck that has very little black devotion. We would probably only play this with a devotion count of 2. So after 2 turns, it's you start sacrificing other creatures after you've sacrificed the 1/1 Harpies. We have Avenger of Heliod, so that's a consideration for the rare, but it might be better to just look at the white cards here. Observant Outseed is a card I really like, and it would give us a cheap card to play, which we currently don't have. Not really keen on adding another 6 or 7-drop to my pile, and Dissolve and all the other cards aren't really interesting for me. Observed Outseed fixes the glaring hole at 2 and 3 that we currently have, and it's not on the same power level as Apparent Overlord, but it's really good in white based heroic decks. Wow, Bow of Nylea still in the pack. I'm not gonna take it here, but it's very, very tough to beat it. So the fact that we are passing it probably means that we might have to face it at some point. So if we see a nice way to deal with an enchantment or an artifact, we might want to pick that up. Failing Cedar is a nice gift here. I did pick mostly white cards in pack 1, so I'm happy that this is still in the pack. Maybe people to my left aren't in white and we will get rewarded. Alright, another targeting effect for white, but not the one that we want. Glare of Heresy, definitely not what we're taking here. This pack looks like white and blue are pretty much non-existent, so I see no other way than taking a black card here. And then it has to be Lash of the Whip, which is better than Return Centaur and Fellhead Minotaur. Pharika's Cure is going to be tough to cast with Phalanx Leader and potentially Metamai the Ageless in consideration. Theoretically, we could also end up only splashing the black, so yeah, Lash of the Whip is just more solid, a lot more solid than Pharika's Cure in the deck we're drafting here, which, to be honest, does look a bit on the wild side still, but we'll make it work. Horizon Scholar is great, Griptide is also great, and Chosen by Heliod is only okay. Even with the Phalanx Leader, it's not a card I want to prioritize here. The thing is that I really don't know how our mana is going to look like, and it's still very possible that this is going to be our only blue card. Metamai is going to be our only blue card. And with Lash of the Whip and Sip of Hemlock, we have the removal that Griptide becomes less important. It's possible that Chosen by Heliod should be the pick here. Oh, let's just take it. It is a white card, and all the white cards just mean that they are going to end up in my deck a much higher part of the time. Shipwreck Singer, Lash of the Whip, all these cards I love to have in my blue-black control decks, but this is not where this is heading, so I'm actually looking at Scholar of Athreos as a very nice way to utilize the black mana later on in the game, stay alive in the early game, but, well, simply having a 3-drop is also quite valuable. Currently, I think that we are heading towards white-black splashing blue, so only a single Metamai as a blue card, and that means I want to have a good curve leading up to that, which means that Scholar is better than Lash of the Whip, looking at our curve currently. Alright. Now there's an Omen Speaker, but as I just said, blue is really just going to be a splash color, which makes Return Phalanx the perfect card for the deck we're trying to draft. Laguna Band Elder is a consideration, but the curve just trumps being able to attack. With a deck that's expensive, that shouldn't really be a problem. Alright, Scorchmark and Last Breath are both fine, but Voyage's End and Triton Fortune Hunter are really, really good, even on the splash. Now, Triton Fortune Hunter, probably not the best in this deck. I just won't have a critical mass of targeting effects, but Voyage's End is a card I'm happily splashing as another way to punish people for playing all these targeting effects and auras. This is once again, between Scorchmark and Last Breath now. Scorchmark feels like the better pick, simply because we have a Phalanx Leader and a Favored Hoplite, whereas Last Breath gives our opponent life and doesn't really deal with the most troublesome permanents anyway. Okay, Evangel of Heliod Wield, of course the opponent Overlord didn't, but that was to be expected. I'm still happy to play another Evangel. I think maybe 4/6 drops is pushing it. Probably looking at 18 lands then, but it might still work out depending on how things shape up. This is interesting. Leonian Snarecaster, Bronze Sable, and Ephra's Warden are all potential picks here. I like the Warden more than most, and I don't like the Snarecaster too much. I also don't see this deck being too aggressive. Bronze Sable blocks Intimidate creatures, but we have some black creatures already, so I'm actually going to take Ephra's Warden. Just deals with those pesky, unblockable creatures or whatnot. Alright, at least it looks like white and black are pretty open. Glare of Heresy is a good sideboard card, but Fellhead Minotaur and Pharika's Cure are solid main deck cards. I really, really like Pharika's Cure, so I'm just going to take it, now that the mana is basically sorted out. Okay, nothing here for us. Just gonna hate draft the Timuret. Another Unknown Shores, not what I'm looking for, but I'm just gonna take it. March of the Returned and a Swamp. So the thing about Unknown Shores is that splashing Medome of Unknown Shores is basically turns it into a 7-drop, which isn't optimal. Sometimes it's just better to have islands instead, especially because being able to cast something like Phalanx Leader on turn 2 isn't going to be possible with Unknown Shores either, so it's not a great fixer. Alright, Elspeth, Sun's Champion. This is going to be picked, and I don't care how many 6-drops I have already. This is, of course, an insane opening here. Hopeful Eidolon, Griptide, Evangel. Of course, we don't really need a third Evangel, but just looking at what we have here, yeah, probably not too much coming back. I would expect both of these to be gone, so there isn't going to be a cheap card to help us with our curve, which means we might have to prioritize cheaper cards now. Oh, or we might have to prioritize mana fixing. There's a Temple of Silence, which would definitely help my mana base. Shipwreck Singer and Triton Fortune Hunter are both blue, so I'm not looking at that. Ordeal of Heliod, you need to be attacking, which this deck isn't good at right now, and it's not going to become good at all of a sudden. Lash of the Whip, Traveler's Amulet, Baleful Eidolon. All of these are fine. The question is, if I take Temple of Silence, there might be a good chance to wheel Traveler's Amulet, Lash of the Whip, Chosen by Heliod, or Baleful Eidolon. Whereas if I take Baleful Eidolon, which would be the pick because of curve purposes, then I'm not sure if I would get something interesting back. The Temple is a rare, so it's more likely to get taken. And this deck definitely needs some fixing. I'm going to take Temple of Silence here. Not because it's worth, I don't know, 2 tickets, but because I think that I'm not going to have a lack of playables, but a lack of good mana could easily lose me the game. This pick is between Cetacean Battle Priest and Sentry of the Underworld. I'm less of a fan of Sentry of the Underworld than most people, but Cetacean Battle Priest just doesn't cut it in the deck we're trying to draft. I can play Yoked Ox if I really want some defensive measures early on in the game, and Sentry of the Underworld is a flyer, which we don't have many of, and just does some very good work. Don't think this pick is close despite our curve. Alright, Traveler's Amulet is a card that would definitely help us with Medomai and Voyage's End. Just having 1 Amulet and 1 Unknown Shores, 1 Island could be enough to splash these blue cards. On the other hand, there is a second Returned Phalanx or the first Hopeful Eidolon. Now, Hopeful Eidolon, while usually great in white decks, doesn't really look like it's doing much in this build because we are so defensive. So I'm going to ignore the Eidolon and also the Chosen by Heliod. Pretty sure it's between Returned Phalanx and Traveler's Amulet, but I have to go with Returned Phalanx here. The fact that we can just put down a 3/3 blocker on turn 2 that has really good mana, and we also might have the blue at some point to make it and turn it into an attacker, just makes it better than Traveler's Amulet, I think. Alright, another Sentry of the Underworld, which fits really nicely with the fact that we've just picked up another 2-drop, so we are still not that interested in Cetacean Battle Priest. Sentry is also just much better than these other 5-drops we have here, so yeah, just I'm going to pick that. Cutthroat Maneuver is nice, but it's best when you are attacking, which we aren't going to be doing. This pack is interesting because it has 2 great black commons, Read the Bones and Disciple of Phanex, 2 of my, well, I wouldn't say favorite black cards, but Read the Bones is definitely up there. I also think that Read the Bones is stronger than the Disciple in this deck. The Disciple is best when your black devotion is at least as high as the number of cards in your opponent's deck, and that's just going to be really unlikely with the deck we're trying to draft. Whereas Read the Bones gives us another thing, something else to do on turn 3, and draws us not only into our powerful 6-drops, but also in the lands that we need to cast them. So yeah, don't think that's particularly close. Happy to have that. And here it's Bloodtor Harpy or a Ray of Dissolution. I've talked about having a potential answer to both Nylea, so this makes the Ray more interesting. But Splatter Harpy is too strong of a main deck card to pick the Ray in this spot. I think it's, if you're more conservative, I could see picking Ray of Dissolution here. I just can't really pass upon a solid 3-drop like the Harpy. Alright, this is interesting. God's Willing is still very good, even if I'm not going for a super aggressive heroic strategy. Return Centaur is only okay, so God's Willing would definitely be better. There's also Gardens of Meletis and Opaline Unicorn. Now the Unicorn is definitely better than the Guardians, and it does a lot for this deck. It might just be the pick simply because of the color fixing it offers. I'm not the biggest fan of the Opaline Unicorn, but this looks like a deck that can make really good use of it, accelerating out Sentry of the Underworld and then the powerful 6-drops that we already have. As expected, Avenger of Heliod is wheeling. Cavern Lampet, not really a card I want in this deck. I don't want to drop a 4-mana 2/2, and I need a solid 4-drop much more than a 6-mana aura that the Cavern Lampet offers. One could think that Avenger of Heliod becomes better with multiples, but I won't have the space to play all of these Evangels. I'm probably looking at only playing one, looking at what I currently have. I'm going to take Return Centaur. Even if it's not making the main deck, it might be a good sideboard card against aggressive strategies. Traveler's Amulet wheeled. There is also Shipwreck Singer. This is the pack where we took Temple of Silence, by the way. Shipwreck Singer is awesome, but not on the splash, and Traveler's Amulet is perfect for what we're trying to do. Could easily see just playing 17 lands and the Amulet. Then we also have the Unicorn, and our mana should be really fine. I have a March of the Return already. As for the Wanderer, might get boarded in against huge black creatures, so... Alright, looks like nobody wants the Amulets. Not sure if I want to play like 16 lands and 2 Amulets, but it's possible. So, yeah, looks like we got ourselves some nice cards. Now we just have to see how it all fits together. Alright, with 2 Traveler's Amulets and an Opaline Unicorn, I think our best course of action is to leave the Unknown Shores in the sideboard, as a single island is going to mean 3 blue sources, and 2 Traveler's Amulets, because they only cost 1 to activate, means it's going to be really safe to just play 16 lands. A single land and Traveler's Amulet is basically a 2-card hand. 2 lands and a Traveler's Amulet is basically a 3-land hand, even if it costs some tempo to activate it. Now, it might seem a little weird to put the more aggressive heroic creatures in this deck, but we want some early plays anyway, so I don't really think it's going to be a problem, and we can easily play a Scorchmark or something along these lines. Alright, we still have a lot of space also, so we kind of need to fill out our deck. Currently, there aren't too many cards that target in this pile, so this is probably the cards that we are looking at the most. Now, Evangel is a consideration, Scorchmark is a consideration. I don't want to main deck Return Centaur, also because I'm looking to only play a single island if possible. So, let's see, Voyages and Medomai the Ageless. Alright, all of these cards without the land is 25, so that would be 15 lands. I already said that I want 16 and 2 Traveler's Amulets, which should be plenty. And that means that it's either Scorchmark or Evangel or maybe some other card that we see. At some point we might want to board in 2 Priests of Iroas to deal with a both of an idea. That would be quite fun. Alright, I talked about Return Centaur. These 2 cards are just not strong enough. Not splashing Mnemonic Wall. And then we don't need a second Evangel. And Decorated Griffin and Sound Artisan are dominated by the 2 Sentries of the Underworld that we already have. So Yoked Ox, Chosen by Heliod, Scorchmark, and Evangel are up for consideration. And we basically have space for exactly 1. I could go with 17 lands, but then I would have 20 20 mana sources in this deck, which is just too much. I like a Theros Warden in this kind of build because I won't be able to deal with everything my opponent does, and this is just a very nice backup creature to have. With the turn 2 Retained Phalanx, we can afford the tempo loss of playing a 1/2 on turn 4. Alright. I'm not going to play Yoke Dogs. We are currently sporting Cetacean Battle Priest already, so that might actually be a card to cut also. With Favored Hoplite and Phalanx Leader, the amount of targeting effects is Observant Elseed, Erebos' Emissary, and a God's Willing. So we have 3 ways to target a card like Phalanx Leader. If we want to make the Phalanx Leader better, kind of have to play one of these 2-drops, which does make Favored Hoplite and Cetacean Battle Priest better as well. It also draws a card, so this Scorchmark looks like it might be the card that I want. Not a single Evangel of Heliod making this deck feels kind of weird, as it's kind of built for this kind of strategy. Just we play out our curve and then we start gumming up the ground with Evangels. We have the Sentry and the great 6-drops. I'm just afraid that the deck becomes too expensive if we do that. Alright, Scorchmark is in, Voyage's End is on the splash, Medomai is on the splash, all of this is fine. Now, Theros Warden is a card that could potentially be cut, and Cetacean Battle Priest could definitely be cut for, and then I think it has to be Evangel of Heliod rather than Chosen by Heliod. Although Chosen by Heliod is a very nice early play, draws some cards, maybe turns this into a 3/5, which also has some value. Now, the Battle Priest is looking weaker and weaker. I also don't know how aggressive my opponents are going to be. Against red decks, I'm definitely going to bring that in, but the question is if Favored Hoplite is actually weaker than Cetacean Battle Priest. At least if I target Phalanx Leader, it's absolutely insane, but if I target Favored Hoplite, it only turns into a 2/3, and my 1 mana slot might actually be occupied by Traveler's Amulet. Yeah, this is a difficult deck to build. Now, let's look at the alternative line of just playing the Evangel and not really caring too much about all these auras, but then I still would want the Scorchmark because of Phalanx Leader, and I would think it's really good on most of our creatures, just having a 4-power Sentry, for example, or just turning this into a 4/3 when your opponent plays something larger than 3 toughness. So this is a nicer build of this deck, just not caring about the early heroic creatures, and Chosen by Heliod, excuse me. Yeah, I kind of like this Evangel. This is a bit more late game oriented now, but I don't really see a big problem in that. I'm gonna start running it like this, and then I can still board in all of these cards against the more aggressive strategies. Alright, then let's look at the mana. A bit more black, because Phalanx Leader doesn't really have to come down on turn 2, and the other double white cards are 6-drops. With a Temple of Silence, there is... Oh wait, what happened here? This is only 23, but a Temple of Silence... Oh, I have one more slot. So this slot, according to what we just said, should probably be Chosen by Heliod, because it draws us to our 6-drops. It still targets the Phalanx Leader, but it's better on our other creatures, and we just don't rely on the early heroic guys. Alright, so we just put in all these additional draw spells, which means that our mana should also work out nicely. Alright, now once again, now we have 15 slots, and I only want a single island. At least 7 swamps as well, because of Rika's Cure, but I'm very happy with an even split of black and white. That looks absolutely perfect. So, just from the lands, 8 white sources, 8 black sources, and 1 blue source, but 2 Traveler's Amulet to find the island, Opaline Unicorn to cast Medomai the Ageless, or Surprise Voyage's End, and then just a very solid curve and deck. Although Phalanx Eater isn't going to be insane. There's still 2 cantripping auras and solid creatures overall. 13 creatures, not the most, but I mean Elspeth and Evangel and Medomai are definitely going to pull their weight. This is going to be interesting. We're going to keep the sideboard cards in mind, maybe even these, and then see how it goes.